discount.
All right, joining us first on the show today, this big Tuesday edition of the Steak for Breakfast podcast, he's the congressman who represents Florida's 8th Congressional District, which means we're welcoming back Representative Mike Haridopolos. Thanks for coming on the show.
Always a pleasure to be with you guys. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure to host. We got a bunch of stuff to talk about. I think the thing that's filling up the news cycle the most is Operation Epic Fury. You know, to see this president work and how the Trump doctrine is being written in real time, redefinition of peace through strength, the rebolsterification of our military, not trying to engage our country in forever wars ever again, and the failed policies of presidents past. It's evidently clear that this has been working. It's also evidently clear that a lot of our, boogeymen type geopolitical foes, especially Russia and China, with the weaponry that they supposedly had supplied to places like Venezuela and Iran over the last couple decades, has all been a massive failure against U.S. military might. I know Congress is tracking this very closely, and I'd like to get your opinion and some commentary on how you feel the operation's been thus far.
Well, once again, our U.S. military has proven to be incredibly accurate and decisive in their actions. We've done everything possible to try to cripple this administration in Iran that's been in power since 1979. And to show you the evil that they possess, not only have the courts limited rights all those entire times, but in the last few months, they've killed maybe tens of thousands of their own people. And so you see where they're content in is simply on one thing: power, power, power. That's all they care about. You see how some of these people who, while Iran's economy among everyday people is in shambles, they go out to London and other places and buy multi-million-dollar mansions. The hypocrisy, much like we saw in areas like Gaza, is overwhelming. And so what we're trying to do is basically take the bully out of the neighborhood who's been terrorized in this area literally since 1979, funding terrorist activities, not just against Israel, but other parts of the world. And the president finally said, you know what, your lies and stalling tactics, we've had enough. And we're going to decisively go in so that the big bully is finally knocked out. And it shows in a lot of ways the fact that the other nations around there are siding with us, not with the Iranians, because they've had enough of the Iranians as well.
You're 100%ly correct. Power is always what they've wanted and what they've wielded against their people, but also propaganda as well. I mean, there might not be a lot of listeners who may be old enough to remember who Baghdad Bob was, or when Saddam Hussein's regime was falling, that iconic video where he was live on the news on Iraqi state television telling people that the United States and coalition forces are being slaughtered in the streets as U.S. tanks literally drove closer to him. And I think the Iranian regime is using a lot of that internally. But Congressman, as someone who's watched the way the world has responded to Donald Trump, his massive successes, but how it's downplayed here in the United States, unlike in other places of the world, is it sad or disappointing to you to watch the mainstream media kind of downplay not only our military might and successes, but try to impede this president and the brave men and women of the armed forces who are risking their lives every day to make the world a safer place?
Well, you wonder what team they're on. I mean, they're always pushing the propaganda. Where were these same propagandists when oil was even more expensive than it is today during most of the Biden administration? And so it is just nonsensical to me, the way they're operating. And it's part of the process that we've always gone through as conservatives. Thank goodness for Twitter, shows like yours, of course, Fox, most of the time, Newsmax. I mean, they're the only saving grace we have in the country. Without Twitter, for example, and your shows like yours, we wouldn't be able to expose all the fraud and corruption that's happening around the country. And to see that they're almost rooting for failure in Iran is amazing. I mean, again, this has been an incredible success. The Navy is at the bottom of the sea. You're destroying a lot of their ability to use what they would call conventional weapons, those ballistic missiles, those drones, those capabilities are slowly being destroyed. And of course, the number one goal is to make sure they do not have enough conventional weapons so they don't get a nuclear weapon. And so this is how preposterous the media has become. The hypocrisy and double standard is overwhelming. And we've seen the same thing, of course, hold true with the immigration issue. So you got to ask yourself, we all love the First Amendment, and I support it fully. But this is where you see the one-sided nature of media really challenge what should be the goal of the United States, eradicating evil in that part of the world, which we've been dealing with, you and I, for our entire life.
Yeah, and what their neighbors are witnessing in real time with all the way the ballistic missiles are just being fired almost indiscriminately at places like Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and obviously others. Listen, I do want to switch gears a little bit. There is still a lot of business going on up on Capitol Hill. You know, we're in that part of the year, mid-March through the end of April, beginning of May, which is known as spring break here in the United States. Unfortunately, the Democrats have refused to budge or negotiate in any way, shape, or form or move towards reopening the government and the DHS bill, which just continues to lay somewhere between the House and the Senate. Now, the House Republicans have done their jobs multiple times, passing just about every piece of challenging legislation they needed to, including all 12 bills appropriated up to the Senate, but it just seems like the stall is there, and that's where the biggest grandstand is right now. Grandstand at the cost of Americans from TSA, air traffic control, FEMA, the Coast Guard, Secret Service, to name a few, who now are enjoying their second full pay period without getting a paycheck. After the really long government shutdown and small recoup period they had before it shut down again, Congressman, it just seems like the Democrats don't care about any part of their base, Americans who want to travel freely, which is their constitutional right around the country and even the world, and anything to have to do with that. We've had some really bad winter weather here in the United States this year. FEMA and the Coast Guard have had to been mobilized and utilized in those instances as well, plus combating maritime terrorism as well. How is the House Republicans kind of watching this, especially now that we're in what most would consider the throngs of the midterm election cycle?
Well, it's beyond frustrating. I mean, let's just talk it in an honest way. The responsibility and why you create a government is to protect your life, liberty, and property. And in this case, the Democrats, as you know, let in at least 10 million people illegally. We have no earthly idea who they are. Then they protected them again in sanctuary cities, and they have to go into these crazy towns like Minneapolis to extract violent offenders who've killed their own or raped their own citizens. And then now you have them denying the ability to use our homeland security measures so we don't have another terrorist attack, let alone the heightened potential for it, because we're finally eradicating the Iranians. And going back to our point earlier about what side is the media on here?
Yep.
And it's just beyond frustrating what is so patently obvious to an everyday citizen that if a person commits a crime, you go and arrest them, let alone if they're here illegally in the first place. And here's the media covering for them. And remember, as you put it perfectly, despite our micro majority, and it's a micro majority, it's a majority of one, we've passed the Department of Homeland Security bill.
Yep.
And the Democrats in the Senate refuse to pass it. And then they have the gall to go on some of these Sunday talk shows and say, oh, we've done that. We passed the bill if the Republicans would just get their act together. I mean, and then the media never calls them on it. I mean, it is like playing the Soviets in basketball in the 1970s when the officials would say nothing to see here, and the one-sided referee that the media is today. And so we're just going to do the right thing. And we're optimistic, cautiously, that they'll finally pass something in the Senate so we can have the best security in place so some tragedy like 9/11 does not happen again.
That's a really good point. And then what about the state of the Save America Act? I know that there's going to be some form of a vote on this in the Senate come Wednesday or maybe even Tuesday afternoon. But it seems like Leader Thune and the block of Senate Republicans who support him at the moment might not have the stomach to, get to the talking filibuster or even examine eliminating the filibuster in its totality. It just seems like the Democrats right now are in this waiting game for the rest of President Trump's term. They're going to try and flip the House in the midterms. I don't necessarily think that they can. I don't think Americans want 10% inflation, open borders, a bajillion refugees, and all the other things we enjoyed under the Biden-Harris administration as well. But, and then make a big play for 2028 where they have some high caliber candidates who are at least starting to formulate on whether or not they're going to run. How important is it for us to fortify and secure our elections and get this bill to the floor to a vote and eventually to President Trump's desk?
Well, there's nothing more important, as President Trump put it so well. And remember, and if nothing else, for the good of America. As you know, in 2016, Democrats lost trust in the election. In 2020, we lost trust in the election, and we need to restore the trust of elections. It's the reason why we have them, and it's a foundational element of our entire Republican form of government. And when you hear the preposterous statements from the Democrats, how this is Jim Crow 2 or something, clearly these guys know nothing about history, and they only know about hysteria. I mean, all we're asking is two basic things. Show your identification, which 14 states don't require. And second, make sure that American citizens are only the persons voting in these national elections. And the other part is insulting for married women or minority groups is
Right.
to somehow you can't figure out how to fill out a form or to show you're an American citizen. The insane nature of it is absolutely ridiculous. And I think we're all just tired of the hyperbole from guys like Chuck Schumer, who will say anything to gain power. And that's all he cares about. And so what we're optimistic about is that people are going to see through this charade and why it's so important to have this big debate in the Senate. I want people to say, why isn't the Senate doing anything? It's because the Democrats won't either fund Department of Homeland Security or the Democrats want to fight to make sure that you don't have to show identification or to confirm that you're an American citizen. Let's have that debate, because what else are we going to pass anyway, given our slim majorities? Let's have the debate and expose their position, which is so incredibly weak. The only people that protect them are the mainstream media groups we have to see on Sunday morning.
No, that's the truth right there. The Sunday morning news circuit does plague that narrative. I do see a lot of House Republicans, especially those from coalitions we're very friendly with here on the show, the Republican Study Committee, also the House Freedom Caucus, saying that they're putting their foot down as far as legislation getting passed if the Democrats aren't willing to open up the government and get the Save America Act to the floor. You know, affordability is going to be something that a lot of Americans are tuned in on as we move closer to the midterm elections, Congressman. I know the House, especially when it comes to, well, home affordability, is pretty dialed in on this issue as well. Can you tell us any of the latest moves that are happening up on Capitol Hill and helping to make homes more affordable for Americans?
Sure. Well, first of all, let's be clear here. I want to have a debate for the 26 elections about affordability. As you put it perfectly, for the last 4 years before we came back into power, the Democrats ran up your interest rates, inflation rates, gas prices, rent, food, you name it, all went up radically. And then the second we get into power, they start pointing the finger at us. I mean, you got to think the American public sees through all this crap. But that said, what we have tried to do is, and our policies, I think, have backed it up. We've seen a real change. We've seen, of course, interest rates come down. The inflation rate is under 2.5%. Massive investment overseas in America. The border is secured. We're removing so many of these bad people who came in here, not just breaking the law, but breaking the law once they got here. And I know you know the website. It's wow.dhs.gov.
Yep.
That's where they put the worst of the worst offenders. And there's even 2,500 of these worst of the worst offenders in Florida, where we have the most aggressive systems and we don't have sanctuary cities. So you know how challenging it must be in other parts of the country. But I want to have a debate about affordable housing and about affordability, because we win on that. And we passed a bill in the United States House overwhelmingly for making housing more affordable. And the way you really do it is you get red tape out of the way, some of these zoning laws out of the way, some of these other scenarios where it's very expensive to even get a permit, and you increase supply. I mean, what happened? You had 10 million people coming to this country illegally. That means more demand, not enough supply. Prices are going to rise. Now, by kicking out about 1.5 million of these people already and building more homes, you drive down the costs, let alone, of course, the fact that interest rates are down. So we're doing the right things. And one last thing I've got to bring up is I think the Democrats are replacing Election Day with Halloween.
Correct.
Because you saw how they took off the mask after the elections in New Jersey and in Virginia. They ran on, quote, affordability. And as soon as they got in office, they jacked up taxes. And they just did the same thing in Washington state. I mean, it's so patently obvious. Their plan is send more money up to Washington or the state capital because they think they know what's best. They think affordability is giving government more money. We think affordability is giving people their own money back that they've earned.
No, that's such an excellent point. I mean, they're driving up the cost of rent, gas prices, consumable energy, going after guns and free speech in a lot of these places that recently had elections, like you had mentioned, New York City, Virginia for sure. And they're telling people one thing for the cycle running up to election day, and then as soon as, like you said, the ballots cool off, the mask comes off, and we are dealing with these radical progressive, green to everything and big bajillion wastes of money that we've seen so much off of, these progressive leftists. Last thing I want to touch with you on, Congressman, today, it's something that we've kind of been touching in and out of, much as Congress has for the last, couple months, and that's the release of the Epstein files and then both of the Clinton nippos. You saw two very different sides of how Bill and Hillary Clinton looked at their, number one, relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and how they kind of reminisced over those times as well. There were a lot of memes that came out of Bill Clinton looking at pictures, reading statements, birthday cards that he had sent to Jeffrey Epstein over the years, and almost like he was going back through a high school yearbook where Hillary Clinton obviously put up the wall. She was very defensive, wanted to distance herself from all that stuff as well. As we continue to pull back the layers and see how just dastardly this entire situation has been, what is your big takeaway from being transparent with the American people on it right now?
Well, look, we wouldn't have this issue before us had it not been for the Republicans coming back into power.
Yep.
For 4 years, the Biden administration could have done any or all of these things that they're complaining about now. They did absolutely nothing. It's like they suddenly found religion. And it's such an insult that suddenly they think they have the high ground on. The only thing that we were trying to do throughout the year was pretty simple. We wanted to make sure that if you're an innocent person or you're a victim, we wanted to keep your name under wraps so that you're not caught into this mess. And whereas the Clintons, who invites someone to their wedding that they don't know? Their daughter's wedding. It's just ridiculous. And again, this is just a classic example of the media taking a hold of this issue. Rohana and these other guys who are living on this, trying to run for president, where have they been the first 4 years? They did nothing under the Biden administration. We actually moved to get these files out there. And I think we should do that with all these different programs. Let the cards fall as
Sure.
they may. It's the same reason I want to put out, if a congressman has been found guilty of sexual harassment, that should be made public, and that there should be some kind of fine, at least, for that congressman who did such a thing. But you can't just allow any frivolous claim to go out in the public and smear someone at the same time. So there has to be some guardrails, but when a person's found guilty, tell the world, especially if they're a member of Congress. So the Democrat hypocrisy is over the top. And they're doing all of it because they know they have the backstop in the mainstream media. And again, I can't thank you enough for having a show like yours. You're willing to take the tough questions and you talk about these things, as are we. And to see people hide behind the media and just the tone that if I go on Meet the Press versus how I'm treated versus a Democrat going on the show, it's radically different. And it's so patently obvious what's happening and why, unfortunately, we have to raise so much money because we're constantly going against the media and the titan industries they control.
Oh, they live in a completely different reality. We bust through that narrative here, and we enjoy doing it with congressmen, hardworking ones like yourself. Listen, great having you on the show today. We've got everything live linked in our show description as well, including a link to your websites. What are some of the places you're available on social media? I'll throw those in there too.
Well, I'm out there on everywhere I can. I really believe in transparency. I tell everybody how I vote each week and why. So you can find us on Twitter, you can find us on Instagram, you can find us on Facebook, and you'll find me walking around the Capitol a lot. I give a lot of tours because, as a former history teacher, I think it's essential that people know how we are standing on the shoulders of giants and how we're so blessed to be citizens of the United States of America.
Hey, we didn't rewrite any history today on the show either with them. We told it straight up and exactly how it is. This is a Congressman representing Florida 8, Mike Haridopolos. Thanks for joining us on the show. So have a great rest of your week. Stay safe out there. We'll see you again soon.
You're the best.